Welcome to part 2 of our discussion on nuclear energy. This half of the PowerPoint is going to just have a brief overview on what radiation is and how it could be used for good, but how it also can be harmful. And we'll just discuss a few of the safety precautions people need to take when they have a job that involves nuclear energy. I'm just going to say right now that I am not the expert on nuclear energy, which is unfortunate, but I do a lot of research on it. It's because it's so new within just human history. There's still a lot of development in it, and so along with this video, I'll be posting several websites that kind of give you some context. I know some of you are really interested in World War II and what led to the atomic bomb. So I found a really nice timeline to kind of give you an idea of the sequence of events that led to the atomic bombings. There are also some websites that help us understand a little bit about how nuclear power is used. So I say all of this to just let you know that this is going to kind of scratch just the tip of the iceberg in terms of how much information there is that could be covered, but really I'm just going to hit the highlights, and then in class we'll go into much more detail, and I'll give you a lot of resources for you to do your own research if you're interested. So first we'll just talk about some uses of nuclear energy. The number one use of nuclear energy these days is power. Many power plants these days are going from like coal and steam and everything to try to find some other way that is going to be a little bit cleaner. And to be honest, nuclear energy actually doesn't put off a whole lot of smoke or steam into the air, so in terms of the pollution aspect, it is cleaner. One downside of using nuclear energy as power is that it costs a lot of money to build and to maintain a power plant, just to make sure that everything is safe. And this word right here, Chernobyl, is actually the name of a power plant that used to be in Ukraine. That is in Eastern Europe, right next to Russia. It used to be part of the Soviet Union back in the 80s. And in 1986, so the year after I was born, there was an explosion in this power plant, I think in a reactor, and there were major consequences that came from that. And I'm actually looking at a website right now because I want to give you some information about it that helps you understand just how bad it was. This website says that right after everything happened, I think about 4 months after, about 28 of the workers at that site were killed just from effects of radiation. And in that time period, another 106 people had enough high doses of the radiation in that power plant that caused them to get radiation sickness. And several other people had died within hours of the reactor explosion. So this is important stuff. There are some people right now that argue that in today's technology, it's much less likely for something like that to happen, but there's still a lot of people arguing in society about which is best, but this is just one of the main things that we can use nuclear energy for. Another use, like if I were to ask you what you think that nuclear energy is used for, a lot of you, especially of the boys, because I know a lot of guys are interested in weapons and war and all that stuff, your mind just might take you to atomic bombs. So Hiroshima, or you might hear it pronounced Hiroshima, I guess it could be either way. That was the first time the atomic bomb was dropped on August 6, 1945. It was kind of a result of the Japanese bombing Pearl Harbor in 1944. And again, I'm going to post a timeline on Edmodo for you to see just kind of what happened between the bombing of Pearl Harbor and the bombing of Hiroshima, so you can see exactly like what took place. But in terms of how many people died, it killed over 100,000 people, and there was a ton of radiation sickness that people had to go through that ended up surviving. And soon after this, Japanese did surrender in World War II, so it ended our second front of the war, but there was a lot of destruction from that. So this just kind of tells you, because of this nuclear fission reaction, we see that it is involving uranium here. So we're breaking up the nucleus. We have a huge explosion that comes from that can be very deadly. So radioactive decay is part of that picture that I was showing you earlier in the other video kind of discussed how nuclear fission works. The decay is a byproduct of nuclear reactions, and that's basically what causes a lot of this radiation sickness. This is when unstable nuclei release the fast-moving particles of the energy, and so we harness this energy, but then a lot of times the fast-moving particles are released into the environment, and if it's in too strong doses, that's when people can get sick. So we can use this decay, if we can kind of catch it before it gets into the environment. We actually use this decay in medicine. So it's interesting that something in high doses can be really harmful, but in small doses it can actually really help save lives. One way that we use radioactive decay in medicine is to be like a detector. First of all, we use these tracers to detect radiation within chemical reactions. So you can kind of follow, like if you put the tracer in a certain part of the reaction, it kind of lights the way, kind of like a highlighter, and you can see where it goes within the chemical reaction. This is also used in plumbing to find leaks in pipes. You can also see radioactive decay used in radiation therapy. So if you've ever known someone who's dealt with cancer, and I'm sure at this point in your life you probably have known someone. In fact, my brother had cancer a few years ago, and he's fine. He had lymphoma, but it took about 6 months of chemotherapy, so he had injections. He had a little port in his chest that was basically there permanently so they could stick a needle in there without having to find a vein constantly. And after 6 months of that, I think he had 2 weeks of radiation therapy. And basically this is used to, the chemotherapy shrinks the cancer, and then it's down to a certain point where it can be kind of zapped with the radiation therapy to completely eliminate it. So praise God, he is fine. It's been, I think, 6 years since we dealt with that. And so, sometimes people are healed and other times people aren't, but radiation therapy is one way that we use to try to help fight cancer and completely defeat it. Now, sometimes people work in places that involve nuclear reactions. In fact, if you've heard of the place called Areva in Lynchburg, sometimes people work in areas that have some radiation and they have to wear protective clothing. And I know these guys look funny, but it's extremely serious that they cover up all of their clothing. And to be honest, in this picture I've had people ask, like, why aren't they wearing masks? And honestly, I don't know, because in my mind the face would be super important to cover up too. But you can see that they have hoods, they have gloves, they have these jumpsuits. In fact, if you know who Miss Cecil is, she used to be our guidance counselor, and she's sometimes subs for Mrs. Brooks in the library, or she actually did come in and work in the guidance office when Mrs. Aslan was out on maternity leave. But her husband actually used to work at Areva, and she brought in one of these suits for students to try on because they actually had smaller versions of it. But this is basically just to protect your clothing and protect your skin from any type of decay that would be harmful to your skin. Finally, when we do have nuclear power plants, this waste has to be disposed of carefully. And so one popular way that they do this is to bury it in dry tunnels. And you might wonder, like, well, why is it really important for the tunnel to be dry? A lot of times it's insulated with walls of cement. And the reason is we want to keep it from contaminating, like, the water supply that may go into a community. And I don't know if you've heard of the movie Erin Brockovich. I think it is PG-13, so I'm not trying to condone this movie for you to watch, but in terms of the plot for the movie, this woman finds that a lot of people around her town are getting sick, and she found that there was actually improper waste disposal of a power plant. It actually was affecting the community because it was getting into their water supply. And so it was just about this woman who didn't have a law background, but she started going after this power plant and ended up getting a lawsuit against them and won a ton of money for the people in their community to be able to have like the treatments they need to survive the sickness that they had. So, I say all of that to let you know, like, this is all very real. It's very serious, and it doesn't just happen in movies, but we use it in everyday life. And again, please be looking for some of these websites that I'll be posting for extra information. You might not be interested at all in it. You might be satisfied with this video, or you might be interested in looking more in depth at some of these subjects. So use it however you want, but when we come into class on Tuesday, please be ready for some discussion on this, and I kind of want to hear what your opinions are. So I hope you have a great long weekend. Enjoy your time, take a break, and behave, and I'll see you on Tuesday.